doing? Let go of me!
They laughed at her. Security dragged her down like she didn't belong. A black woman, a pilot, humiliated at the very airport she trained her whole life to work in. Minutes later, those same people who doubted her sat frozen in fear, as she was the only one standing between them and death. This is the story of how a black pilot, attacked and shamed at the airport, saved 317 lives as the emergency pilot. Imani Brooks was 29 years old, born and raised in Detroit, the daughter of a mechanic and a school secretary. Her dream had always been to fly. She had the training, the license, the uniform, yet standing in the center of Atlanta International Airport that morning, none of it mattered. To the two security officers holding her against the cold wall, she wasn't a pilot, she was a threat. People stopped to watch. Phones came up. A child asked his mother, "Why are they hurting her?" The woman whispered something sharp, pulling the boy away, as if Imani's very presence was dangerous. "ID doesn't look real," one officer muttered, twisting her arm tighter. She showed her badge again. It was official. It had her photo, her credentials, the stamp of the FAA. Still, the taller officer smirked, saying, "Lady, don't play dress up. Where's the real pilot?" The humiliation burned through her chest. She wanted to shout, to fight back, but she also knew how quickly black women who raised their voice were labeled aggressive. So she bit her tongue, holding the pain inside, watching the faces around her. Some were curious, some disgusted, some entertained. Then it happened. A thunderous crack shook the glass windows. People screamed, luggage toppled, and a child's balloon burst in the chaos. Smoke curled up near the gates. Alarms blared. The officer gripping her arm froze, eyes wide. In that instant, Imani felt the shift. Something bigger was happening. Something no one was ready for. And she was the only one trained to survive it. Long before that airport chaos, there was a little girl standing on a cracked sidewalk in Detroit, staring up at the sky. That girl was Imani. At 9 years old, she'd spend hours at the edge of the airport fence with her father, Marcus, watching silver planes roar above. "Look at them," he'd say, his hands greasy from a day fixing cars. "Machines don't care about color. You put in the work, they'll take you anywhere." His words lit a fire in her, brighter than anything else in her small world. But her mother, Lena, always worried. "Baby, people don't want girls like you flying planes. It's dangerous in more ways than one." Her mother spoke from fear, not hate, but Imani felt the sting all the same. She remembered clutching her toy airplane under the covers at night, whispering to herself, "One day, I will fly higher than they ever expect." At school, teachers laughed when she wrote "pilot" on her dream board. One said, "Why not a nurse? That's more realistic." But Imani didn't care. She carried her father's voice inside her like armor. She believed in the sky more than she believed in people. One winter night, after another round of cruel jokes from classmates, she stood outside in the snow, staring at the faint blinking lights overhead. She clenched her fist and made a silent promise. "I will fly. No matter what. Even if it kills me." The first day of flight school should have been the happiest moment of her life. Instead, it was another battlefield. Imani walked into the small classroom, the only black student, and one of only 2 women. The room went quiet. Eyes measured her like she was out of place. During lunch, she heard whispers. "She's probably here because of some diversity program." Another voice, "Hope she knows planes don't come with training wheels." Imani worked harder than anyone. She studied manuals until dawn, practiced checklists until her hands cramped, and took on late-night cleaning jobs to pay tuition. Yet, no matter what she did, it never seemed enough for them. Her first solo test flight came on a windy afternoon. Hands trembling, she climbed into the cockpit, breathing heavy but determined. For a moment, she felt free, the plane lifting, the clouds wrapping around her like a secret. But fear got the better of her. Her landing was rough, nearly sending the small craft off the runway. Her instructor shook his head. "Maybe this isn't for you," he said flatly. The shame was crushing. Sitting alone in her car afterward, tears ran hot down her face. She thought about quitting. Thought about proving everyone right. But something inside her whispered, "Not yet. Not like this." That night, she opened her textbooks again. And she vowed the next time she touched the sky, she wouldn't let go. Her second chance came weeks later. The weather was clear, the sky wide open. Captain Harris, one of the few senior black pilots she'd ever met, stood by as her mentor. "You're not flying to prove them wrong," he said. "You're flying to prove yourself right." His calm voice steadied her nerves. Imani climbed into the cockpit, heart pounding. This time, she trusted her training. She trusted herself. The takeoff was smooth, the climb steady. She whispered the checklist, hands firm on the controls. High above the ground, a strange peace settled over her. For the first time, she wasn't hearing the insults or doubts. She was hearing only the hum of the engine, the rhythm of her own breath. When she brought the plane down, her landing was so smooth the wheels kissed the runway. Harris clapped slowly, pride in his eyes. "Never forget this," he said quietly. "They'll never forgive you for being better. That's your burden. Carry it with grace." Imani felt both lifted and weighed down by his words. She had proven herself, yes. But she knew the fight was only beginning. Walking back across the tarmac, sun on her face, she realized something powerful. She wasn't just flying anymore. She was surviving. Imani finally achieved the milestone she'd fought for, her first airline job with a regional carrier. She put on the crisp navy blue uniform, wings pinned proudly to her chest, and felt like she'd conquered the world. But the dream soured fast. In the crew lounge, other pilots ignored her. At gates, passengers stared in disbelief. One man actually said, "Can I meet the real pilot?" as if she were part of a joke. She smiled through it, swallowed the pain, and kept working. Every flight she flew was flawless, but still, the questions came. "Are you the flight attendant? Are you lost?" She carried those words like stones in her pocket, heavy and unshakable. One evening, after a perfect landing, she overheard two pilots laughing. Affirmative actions really doing the rounds. They didn't care she could hear. Later, in her hotel room, she locked the door, pulled off the uniform, and curled up on the bed. The walls felt like they were closing in. The silence was suffocating. She wanted to scream, but only tears came. Tears for the dream that felt stolen every day she lived it. And then, in the middle of her breakdown, the hotel phone rang. The voice on the other end would change everything. The phone call was nothing more than the front desk reminding her about checkout. Yet the knock that followed changed her life. A young mechanic, Ethan Walker, stood at her door with a clipboard. The airline needed her signature for a routine maintenance report. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with grease still smudged on his fingers. His smile wasn't forced like the ones she wore daily, it was easy, almost boyish. "Sorry to bother you," he said, scratching his neck. "Figured I'd save you a trip downstairs." Imani thanked him, but the warmth in his tone lingered long after he left. She saw him again weeks later on the tarmac, bent over an engine, humming a country tune she couldn't place. He waved. She waved back. It was small, but for Imani, it was new. They started talking. At first, about planes. He loved fixing them as much as she loved flying them. Then about family, music, bad diner coffee. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not doubted. But when she mentioned him to her father, the reaction was harsh. "He'll never understand what it means to be you," Marcus said, shaking his head. "Don't fool yourself. That night, Imani sat awake, staring at her phone, Ethan's number glowing on the screen. Her father's warning echoed, but so did Ethan's laugh. And she couldn't decide which voice to follow. One Friday evening, Imani was assigned a short flight from Chicago to Dallas. The cabin was full, tension already buzzing as delays mounted. She greeted passengers at the door, but one man froze when he saw her. "You're the pilot?" he asked, his voice dripping disbelief. When she nodded, he barked, "I'm not letting some diversity hire fly me." His words echoed, passengers murmuring. Imani forced a smile, walked past him, and entered the cockpit. Her co-pilot, a younger white man, smirked. "Guess you're famous." Not once did he defend her. The flight was rough, crosswinds tossing the plane. Passengers gripped armrests, fear spreading. Imani stayed steady, hands locked on the controls. Her voice over the intercom was calm, commanding, soothing. When the wheels finally touched down, the cabin burst into applause. Relief everywhere. But outside the cockpit, the first passenger she passed muttered, "Lucky break. Next time we won't be so fortunate." Her supervisor met her at the gate, clipboard in hand. "Passenger complaint," he said coldly. "They don't feel comfortable with you flying again." Imani's chest tightened. She had saved them, yet still she wasn't enough. She wanted to shout, but instead she signed the report and walked away. Behind her, the same supervisor whispered to another crew member. Maybe she should have been a stewardess instead. The weight of her career battles followed her home. At Sunday dinner, tension was thick. Her father sat stiffly at the table, arms folded. Her mother tried to soften the mood, passing cornbread and roast chicken, but words cut sharper than knives. "You're wasting your time with him," Marcus said, refusing to look at Imani. "Flying is hard enough. Now you're bringing more trouble." Imani clenched her fork. "Ethan supports me more than half the people I work with." Marcus's eyes hardened. "Support doesn't erase ignorance. One day, you'll learn." Her mother sighed, pleading for peace, but the damage was done. Imani left the table, tears stinging her eyes, the smell of home-cooked food turning bitter in her throat. Later that night, her mother came to her room. "Baby, your father's scared," Lena whispered. "Not of Ethan, of losing you. He doesn't know how to protect you anymore." Imani stared out the window at the dark sky. She wanted to believe her mother, but all she felt was abandonment. The next morning, Marcus didn't speak to her at all. He walked past her with his coat, keys jangling, the slam of the door echoing like a final word. And for the first time, Imani wondered if chasing her dream meant losing her family. Months later, Ethan got down on one knee in a quiet park, holding out a simple silver ring. His eyes shone with sincerity. "Marry me, Imani. Let me stand beside you." Her heart raced. She thought of every insult, every doubt, every shadow cast on her career. Was this the right time? Was she ready? But looking at him, steady and patient, she said yes. They laughed, hugged, cried together. For a moment, the world felt lighter. Until the engagement dinner. Ethan's family hosted it, a warm living room filled with chatter. Plates of barbecue, sweet tea in glasses. Then a relative leaned in with a half-smile. "So, Imani, do you fly planes or clean them?" The laughter that followed cut like glass. Ethan's face turned red, his hand tightening on hers. "That's enough," he snapped, but the damage was already done. Imani excused herself, hiding in the bathroom, staring at her reflection. She had faced strangers' cruelty before, but from the family of the man she loved. That was different. That was deeper. When she walked out, the room went silent, eyes darting. She forced a smile, but her chest ached. And as Ethan drove her home, she couldn't stop wondering. Was love enough to survive a world determined to tear them apart? Work became even colder. Whispers followed her through hallways. One morning, she opened her logbook and froze. Entries were missing, dates altered. It looked like she hadn't completed required safety checks. A serious accusation, one that could end her career. She rushed to her supervisor. He flipped the book shut with a sigh. Negligence is dangerous. You're suspended while we investigate. His tone made clear the decision was already made. Imani's protests fell flat. Check the cameras, the records, it wasn't me. But no one listened. Pilots avoided her in the lounge. Flight attendants whispered in corners. She was already guilty in their eyes. At home, Ethan wrapped his arms around her. We'll fight this. We'll clear your name. His conviction steadied her, but inside she felt broken. Years of sacrifice, and now this, one lie powerful enough to undo it all. Weeks later, a letter arrived in a plain envelope. She tore it open with trembling hands. We regret to inform you, your employment is terminated effective immediately. The paper fell to the floor. Silence filled the room, heavy as stone. Imani stared at her discarded uniform in the closet, the wings pinned neatly to the blazer. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the sky had never been meant for her. Losing her job felt like losing the air itself. Imani sat in her small apartment surrounded by silence. The uniform she once wore with pride now hung in the closet like a reminder of failure. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The world she fought for had pushed her out without a fight. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors avoided her. Headlines whispered about her negligence, though no evidence was ever found. At night, she lay awake hearing the voices of her critics. She's not capable. She doesn't belong. Ethan tried to help. He picked up extra shifts, cooked meals she barely touched, told her stories to make her laugh. But even his love felt like a fragile rope holding her from the fall. One evening, she stood in the bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror. Her eyes looked older, dimmer. The girl who once promised to touch the sky seemed gone. She pulled the uniform out, laid it across the bed, and pressed her face against it. Tears soaked the fabric. And for the first time, she whispered the words she feared most, maybe they were right. The next morning, her phone rang. The voice on the other end didn't belong to Ethan, her parents, or any friend. It was a name she hadn't heard in months. Captain Harris. Imani, his voice was steady, like always. I recommended you for an emergency backup pilot program. They need people who won't crack under pressure. She sat frozen. Her heart raced, but her voice was weak. Why me? They fired me. Because I know you. And because no matter what they said, you're the best damn pilot I've trained. The offer felt like a lifeline. Still, doubt twisted inside her. What if I fail again? What if they laugh me out the door? Harris didn't flinch. Failure isn't the enemy. Fear is. The question is, do you want to fly, or do you want to run? Imani closed her eyes. For weeks she drowned in shame. This was her chance at redemption. But taking it meant stepping back into the world that had broken her. That night, Ethan found her staring out the window. What's on your mind? He asked softly. She told him. He smiled and kissed her forehead. Go. Show them who you are. Show them who they threw away. Imani lay awake until sunrise, torn between safety and destiny. Finally, as dawn broke, she whispered to herself, one more chance. And she dialed Harris back. The emergency pilot program wasn't glamorous, it was brutal. Simulations threw her into nightmare scenarios, engine failures, fires, rapid descents. Trainers barked at her, doubting her skills before she even touched the controls. During one drill, an instructor sneered. You people can't handle pressure. The words cut, but Imani pressed forward, her fingers moving steady across switches, her voice sharp with commands. The simulator bucked and screamed, but she landed it safely. Every day, the same pattern, doubt thrown at her, strength forced out of her. Her hands blistered from endless hours at the controls, her voice hoarse from barking emergency procedures. But she grew sharper, tougher. Late one evening, Harris pulled her aside. "You're not here to impress them," he said. "You're here because one day, the sky will ask everything of you. And you must be ready to give it." Those words stayed with her. On her final test, alarms blared and fire erupted on the simulator screen. She breathed deep, shut out the voices of doubt, and landed safely again. The room fell silent. Harris looked at her with pride. "This isn't practice anymore. One day, it'll be real." Imani swallowed hard. She didn't know that, one day, was coming sooner than anyone expected. Atlanta International Airport was buzzing with travelers when Imani walked in that morning. Dressed in her uniform again, she felt both strong and fragile. Each step echoed like a test. Security eyes followed her. One officer blocked her path, smirking. "Pilot? That's a good one. You sure you're not lost?" The humiliation returned like an old wound. She held up her badge. He laughed. Passengers glanced, some whispering, some smirking. The same story again, respect denied before she even opened her mouth. Her chest tightened, but she kept walking. She reminded herself, "I've trained for worse. I belong here." Then, just as she approached her gate, chaos erupted. A sudden alarm blared. Smoke filled the air. Screams echoed across the terminal. People ran, dragging children, clutching bags. Through the crackle of the loudspeakers came the announcement. "Engine fire reported on Flight 317. Immediate assistance required. Repeat, Flight 317 is in critical danger." The airline staff panicked. The captain of that flight had collapsed from a heart attack. The crew was scattered. And Harris, standing nearby, pointed at Imani. "She can do it." Chaos ruled the air. Passengers crowded the counters, screaming at agents. Children cried, alarms blared, and smoke seeped through the glass windows. Flight 317 sat on the tarmac, its engine spitting black fumes. The airline manager's face was pale. "We don't have anyone cleared to take that flight out," he stammered. "The captain's gone, and no one else is qualified." Harris stepped forward, firm and unshaken. "She's qualified. She's trained. She can fly that plane." Dozens of eyes turned toward Imani. Gasps, mutters, disbelief. "Her," someone shouted. "Are you insane?" Another voice cut through, "I'm not trusting my life to her." Imani's hands trembled, but inside, a different fire burned. She thought of the years stolen from her, the insults, the sabotage. She thought of the little girl staring up at the sky, promising to fly no matter what. Ethan, rushing through the crowd, grabbed her hand. His voice carried over the noise, "She's the only chance you've got. If you want to live, let her fly." The crowd fell silent for one sharp second. Smoke rolled heavier outside. Time was running out. Imani squared her shoulders, stepping toward the jet bridge. And as the engines roared in the distance, she whispered to herself. "This is what I was born for." All eyes were on her as she stepped onto the jet bridge. The smoke outside stained the sky, the smell of fuel sharp in the air. Behind her, voices rose in protest. "No way, I'm letting her fly me," one man shouted. Another added, "She's not even supposed to be here." But Ethan's voice cut through the storm. "You can sit here and die, or you can let her save you." Imani didn't turn back. Her pulse hammered in her throat as she climbed into the cockpit of Flight 317. The captain's chair was still warm, his headset lying abandoned. The weight of the seat felt heavier than any moment in her life. The co-pilot, pale with panic, stammered, I can't do this alone. Relief washed over his face when she slid in beside him. Are you sure you're cleared? He whispered. Her eyes locked on the controls. I'm sure. Passengers filed in slowly, fear written across their faces. Some cursed under their breath. Some prayed. Children clung to their parents. Imani's hands moved over switches, her voice calm. Engine 1 failing, engine 2 unstable. We're going to need an emergency departure and reroute. The co-pilot glanced at her in disbelief. She sounded like she'd been born for this. The tower's voice crackled over the radio, Flight 317, you are not cleared for departure. Imani closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and pushed the throttle. Because waiting meant death. The plane shuddered as it lifted from the ground. Passengers screamed, gripping armrests, some crying out in prayer. Smoke still poured from the left engine, alarms blaring in the cockpit. Imani's heart pounded, but her voice was steady. Stabilizing climb. Give me altitude checks. The co-pilot obeyed, hands shaking. 3,000, climbing. For a moment, fear clawed at her throat. Doubt whispered like ghosts, you're not good enough. You'll kill them all. They'll never forgive you. She heard her father's old warning, they'll never let you win. Her chest tightened. Sweat trickled down her neck. The plane hit turbulence, sending trays and bags crashing in the cabin. Screams rose again. But deep inside, another voice fought back. Her own. You trained for this. You survived worse. This is your sky. Imani gritted her teeth, gripping the controls tighter. We're not going down today. The co-pilot stared at her, disbelief shifting into awe. How are you so calm? I'm not, she whispered. But they don't need to know that. The radio crackled again, Flight 317, reroute. Severe weather ahead. Nearest safe landing strip is flooded. Options limited. Imani's jaw clenched. The only path left was the one no pilot wanted to take. Dark clouds swallowed the sky, rain lashing against the windshield. The radar glowed red with storms. The runway ahead was blocked. There's nowhere to land, the co-pilot muttered, panic thick in his voice. There's always somewhere, Imani said. Her eyes darted over the map. One option glared back at her, a water landing. Dangerous. Deadly. Almost impossible. She took the intercom. Her voice rang through the cabin. This is your pilot. We've lost one engine, and the weather has closed the runways. We're attempting a water landing. Follow crew instructions. Stay calm. The cabin erupted, shouts, sobs, disbelief. But her voice had steadied them enough to listen. As the plane descended, every second stretched long. The engines screamed, wind howled, alarms blared. Imani blocked it all out, focusing only on her training. Flaps down. Gear up. Brace positions. The water loomed closer, black and endless. Her hands trembled, but she held on. Then, with a thunderous crash, the plane hit. Water exploded around them, metal screeched, bodies jolted forward. For a terrifying moment, silence followed, like the world itself had stopped. And then, the impossible. The plane floated. Inside the cabin, sobs turned into gasps of relief. People clutched each other, kissing the ground of the aisle, thanking God, thanking fate. A child looked up at Imani as she walked through the cabin, whispering, "She saved us." News spread fast. Cameras swarmed as rescue boats approached. Reporters shouted over one another, "Black female pilot lands plane in the river, 317 lives saved." The world that had doubted her was now shouting her name. But not everyone celebrated. Airline officials stood stiffly on the dock, shame heavy on their faces. They had fired her, humiliated her, cast her out. Now, she was the reason hundreds were alive. The security guard from earlier, the one who mocked her, stood frozen as she passed. His mouth opened but no words came. His silence was louder than any apology. Ethan rushed forward, wrapping her in his arms. "You did it," he whispered, his voice breaking. But as reporters pushed microphones toward her, questions flying, Imani stayed quiet. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for the one face she still needed to see. And then, there he was. Her father. Standing at the edge, tears shining in his eyes. The press conference was packed. Lights flashed, cameras rolled, voices shouted questions. Imani stood tall, uniform still damp from the landing. She wasn't just a pilot now, she was a symbol. A reporter asked, "What do you say to those who doubted you?" She paused, letting the silence stretch. Then she said, calm and sharp, "They tried to ground me. But I was born to rise." The room erupted in applause. In the back, Marcus Brooks finally stepped forward. For years, he had doubted, resisted, pushed her away. Now, his voice carried clear, "That's my daughter." The airline offered her job back, smiling wide as if they hadn't destroyed her life months before. She looked them in the eye and shook her head. "No. I'm not flying for people who never believed I could. I'm flying for the kids who will." She launched a nonprofit to teach young black children about aviation, giving them wings long before the world could clip them. On the day of her first program, she stood before a group of wide-eyed kids. One little girl raised her hand and asked, "Were you scared when no one believed in you?" Imani knelt down, smiling. "Yes. But I flew anyway." The children cheered. The sky stretched wide above them, endless and waiting. And as the sun set, Imani Brooks, once doubted, once broken, finally understood her story. It was never just about saving lives. It was about teaching the world that courage always takes flight. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope. Remember, kindness, courage, and truth will always rise above hate.